Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Key to Games podcast here on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. I am Josh Placer, and my co-host is the indie developer currently working on the game Samurai Pig, Joshua Reyes. How are you doing this pre-holiday week?
I am doing great. Holidays have been good. Everything's been going really smooth for me. Not so well with Unreal Engine 5, getting used to that. But other than that, everything's going well. How are you doing, Josh?
I am hanging in there. Been busy, still dealing with the family, unfortunately, issue from last month, and doing more of the no, it's not the Game Awards, the
The
IGF
GG,
judging.
IGF, yeah.
And this week, I'm going to start getting the Game of the Year lists going. So it's going from 10 games to now about 30 to 35 games I'll be giving awards to. So
Good deal.
I'm tripling the number of indie games.
Good deal. How many were awarded in the one we the co-op survival we suffered through?
I think one, maybe two.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, which, oh wait, did we count Stray as an indie game?
No, I
Okay,
don't. We
then I think it
can't.
was zero.
That's too much triple A. What was it? Triple A independent.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it is.
Yeah. I should have that as a category on my list.
You should. You should definitely. That'll be a good. And then Stray will insta win, Josh. So
Yeah.
there's no other one that can fit.
But I hope everyone watching this live recorded is having a great week. I need to get our last cast posted as well, probably for Sunday, because it's
Yeah,
been a very busy week. We finally got our roundtable. We wrangled all the developers. We jumped through all the hoops, but we finally got it recorded, and I think I want to try to get that up maybe just before the end of the year, because I don't want to sit on that one because it was a really good conversation.
that was awesome. And we got how many devs together?
Oh
Um,
yeah, counting you will be four,
four.
and
Yeah.
me as the
So
ranting guy.
literally, as a ran, yeah, so literally, that's almost a miracle. I thought it would be a good game concept. I'm gonna kind of work on it, prototype, and see what I can come up with.
There you
But
go.
again, it's gonna be that game will probably end up on the onboarding discussion for terrible onboarding. So
Yeah. But as a positive, you can use a lot of pre-made assets, which is a good
right,
segue into
perfect
our
segue, Josh.
topic. Yes, for this week. We're going to be talking about the use and kind of the implementation of pre-made assets, whether they are audio, art, or even just using like code samples. This has been something that if you talk to a YouTuber about it is, the worst thing imaginable. This game uses art assets, they're just copy and pasting. We've used the term programmer art has been thrown around a whole lot in these games. And
It flips.
oh yes, acid flips. That has never been uttered before on a YouTube video, I'm
Never
sure.
heard it, and I think this is the first time, Josh. We're
Yeah.
breaking records now.
But it is something that, for a lot of developers, it does have lots of benefits to using pre-made assets,
Definitely.
especially if you use them smartly when it comes to how they fit into your game. And since we have a game developer here, I'm going to let Josh kick things off, discussing the
Right on.
positives of pre-made.
Right on. So, I'm gonna get on a little bit of a rant here, and we're gonna basically talk a little bit about like how the sausage is made and why pre-made assets, in any type of fashion, such as audio, characters, just whatever we're discussing, uh, would be great for your game, as long as used properly, which we will discuss later. So basically, like we're like nowhere near the apex or the zenith of game design. A
Hmm.
lot of game designing and creativity is actually banging against the process of getting it created, right? There's not a lot of analogies we use. One of them is the vehicle one. So basically, it would be like if you could imagine a car manufacturer dedicating like 80% of its resources to figuring out how the tire works, or what kind of how the steering wheel works, or what type of what noise should the trunk make when it opens, or does the trunk actually open, right? So there's a lot of things that we're creating from literally atomic levels, and we're still at that
Mm-hmm.
level in game development, right? So, um, even though it is like 30 years into the industry, we're still very much at a very almost primordial infancy level when it comes to some of the blocks that game designers or developers have to face um, to achieve their creative visions. So, in that respect, the long way about it would be saying that assets are extremely advantageous to you because you already have basically it's like having Lego blocks that, if used correctly, you can build your vehicle instead of going to get the plastic, smelt it, make it, decide which color dye you're going to put in the Lego block, how they're going to fit, etc. Because that's literally still where we are at the point. Like if you were to open up Unity or Unreal, for example, the first time you open up, there's literally nothing there. So every single decision has to be made, right? And there's certain things that are already done and created, right? That can save you so much time. For example, character art, concept art, audio, AI, and things like that. So pretty much that's just a long rant or the TLTRDR of why they can be good for your game, right?
Mm-hmm.
Also, just like another side note is that they're very good to study from. Usually, they're most of the time they're good to study in two ways. You can see poor design and you can see bad design in the way that certain models or assets or programming or data assets are put together. So you can learn a lot. You can look at one that's well made, learn a lot from it. And then, of course, the other thing, that the other aspect that we have to get to is how to properly implement all these things. But having all these Lego blocks already there made for you really opens you up to a massive amount of just you're just basically creating the experience. So, and because I always, one of my favorite ways to describe game development is that we are making the rocket ship while it's launching, and we're deciding which screwdrivers to use, which one's the most efficient one. Um, which welder do we use that won't make it explode while it's launching? Which voltage do we want? Like we're literally doing so many things on such a low level, and there's a lot of tedious things that can be automated or outsourced, um, or that you can find elsewhere through the marketplace because there's so many things that are available. I actually have like a little list that we might want to post below of like some places that people can go to look at for like marketplace assets for textures and
Mm-hmm.
there's even stable diffusion is listed in there for Blender, all kind of things. There's, like we've talked about in previous podcasts, this is literally one of the best times to be a game developer, right? And one of those reasons is because of the amount of assets that are out there, the amount of code bases that are out there, and the amount of audio that is out there. What did Humble Bundle?
Yep. Oh yeah. I've seen them as well. They have, they have Planet Digital Books. They
Yeah,
have lots of software
ex-
assets, music assets, art assets,
you
whatever.
can get your book on there.
Yeah. Just make sure hit the special button that gives all the percentage to me only. It's hidden in the UI. You just gotta look for
You got to dig real deep in the API.
it. Yep. And to add on to what Josh was saying, that again, as someone who never did programming, at least game programming at that level, I loaded up Unity a few years ago, and it was a bit of a shock to find that there is nothing.
Nothing.
There is a complete blank canvas, and that is where a lot of video games start from. And it
Yeah.
can be one of the major hurdles for why it can be difficult to get into game design. Because
There is literally a syndrome, the blank canvas syndrome, right, Josh? Sorry
yeah,
to interrupt you, right?
oh yeah. And I have the infinite Steam
You
backlog issue right
right.
there. And the challenge is the fact that if you have no idea where to start or what you're even trying to do, how do you actually get going? And
Right.
this is actually a really good thing that when we talk about onboarding, that I will be ranting about on the strategy roundtable about
Gonna do the dual stream.
maybe of Terra Invicta. But it's an idea of what is step one to game design. And like Josh said, the thing about game design is that you're not oftentimes just immediately clicking a button and, okay, I'm building game mechanics. You need to think about what assets you're going to use. Where are you going to, what engine you're going to be using, what kind of sound you're going to have. Can you build all the assets yourself, or can you hire someone? And even if you hire someone, can they make it at the level or at the what kind of aesthetic that you need? Because these are things that, again, it doesn't sound like when we say here, like, to be all that difficult. What's harder, finding a dragon or building a combat system? But the thing is, as we have seen, as I'm sure everyone here was well aware of, people will judge a game by the images, by what they see and hear, before they even load up your game, before they even click buy on Steam, Humble, Itch, whatever. And if your game doesn't, look the part, people aren't going to check it out. And this is one of the things that I see when I judge a lot of games, when I even pick up a lot of games from itch.io. They can be fantastic games, but do they have that same level of graphical or aesthetic polish as, say, a fully furnished studio like a Clay or a Kid Fox? Or again, the difference between using Unreal Engine as an indie and Unreal Engine as Epic and putting that into their games. And again, these are the things that it takes a lot. And to GMD's comment about badly optimized, again, we can rant and rave. I know we've done that before about games that aren't optimized right, that have memory leaks, that, you load the game up and it looks, worse than, it doesn't even come close to looking like a game like Doom Eternal. It may even look worse than Mario, but it may only run like 10 frames per second.
Oh, so we're already in the dark side of using assets because, like I was saying, you can learn a lot from assets. But the thing is that someone, okay, so I don't know, I'm gonna buy a character controller off the marketplace, right? The design paradigm that this person used might not fit with my design paradigm or my game at all, because my game, the game that I'm designing, is my game, is very unique. There is no game that is similar underneath it all, right? So when you purchase something and then you say, okay, this game loads up and it runs so bad, it's because they might have so many disparate, like, different assets running together that are not designed to run together in any way, form, shape, or fashion, or they weren't even programmed well from the beginning, right? You can buy some characters that weren't optimized with their quads or polygons, weren't rigged correctly, right? I've bought so many assets off the asset store that I've spent more time trying to fix them, to fix the issues that they had inherited in them, than I would have, like, I don't know, maybe hiring someone. So there's always dark sides to it too, but there's still a ton of good sides. And the point that you brought up is when you open up Unity and you're like, okay, well, what do I do? And the thing that marketplace assets allow you to do is they allow you to conceptualize, right? So they remove that the aspect of needing to actually create all the atomic silicon particles, like Tom Helms was saying that he makes everything out of silicone. all of his assets, he starts from scratch. And I know he does. That dude, he's a legend. and so basically, like, having it already done at that level is just so advantageous to a game developer, because you can just take these assets and you can just put them down and you can start playing with them, start messing with the character controller, start getting things together, right? And they'll help you get moving, because if you spend, for example, when you first open up Unity and all you want to do is just make the character move left to right, that itself could be a whole year of learning, right? And is that really necessary? Is that really something that you should do when getting a character moved left to right? You could purchase some code base, learn from it, purchase an asset, have that done already, and then put your own flair, personality, juice. It's your own game, consistency through art direction. Boom, to good, right?
Yeah, and what you said there is a really good point. And again, as someone who tried to make something in Unity, I can attest to the nightmare it is just to get something to go from here to here. Yep. And then when you add jumping into the mix, There,
Double jumping, and that's why you still exclaim about double jumping in this game, and there's a reason. Is
mm-hmm.
because it's still so hard to implement correctly, right?
Yep.
It's like, even though we know we have like the literal like mathematical calculations, the execution of it is still so different depending on each game.
Yep. And to what you just said about using like code blocks or code assets, that was one of the things I found very interesting about Game Maker. And they have like those prefab or those instances of code, so that yes, you could sit there and type up the entire code and programming logic to get a character to jump or walk or shoot, or just take the prefab of shoot, drag it over to your asset, make sure you type in what key you want to use, and it's done.
Boom, boom, and then instead of dealing with the how do I make a character move, you're adjusting how it moves. You're adjusting different factors, like it's coyote time. You're adjusting art. You're working on more creative things, because in the end, we're trying to create an experience. You're not trying to prove to someone, hey, I ground up the wheat. I grew the wheat to make this bread for you here. I hope you enjoy this sandwich at my restaurant. Like, that's not. We want to put out a product that works, and sometimes, however you like, I know a lot of people are like, well, I want to code that from the start. It's already done. It's like if you wanted to get a car and you're like, no, I'm going to figure out how to build my own motor, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of these things are already solved already, and like, we should be moving on to more creative portions about that. And go ahead.
Yep, and that is a really good point. That there's a lot of stuff at the most foundational, level 0.
Yeah.
You're just like, to your point about harvesting the wheat, it would be like someone as a contractor having to go and make the cement themselves, or chop down the trees to saw the wood to make the planks to then build the walls. A lot of the basic stuff is already there. It's done. Now again, you can tweak things. You can adjust them. As you were saying, when it comes to platforming logic, having the code or having the code logic and the code philosophy to do a jump, okay, that's great. Where can you take that from there? Can you implement wall jumping? Can you implement coyote time, double jumping, dash jumping, every kind of jump we saw in like Super Mario? These are the things that can elevate a game. And again, the basic stuff that I would say it doesn't really sell a game anymore. Hey, your character can walk left or right. Here's $29.95. Your character can just do that. Give me $15. Cool.
Yeah, and see, and I'll watch people on Twitter, and I'm not calling out names. And this poor guy, I've watched him for 9 months working on a Unity game. It's been him 9 months just to get the character to jump up and down and move left and right. You know what I mean? And like, there is literally like a free asset on the asset store that does that already, and you can study it and learn how to do that. And there's no you earn nothing by saying, okay, I learned how to do it this way. That logic is already there and it's already figured out.
Yeah,
right.
And again, like, there is some positive to doing it all yourself, if you can master it, if you can improve your skills. But again, there is that issue, as we all know, of time. Right. If it takes you 9 months, 2 years, 4 years to implement something that it could take someone 6 months using pre-made assets and already developed code, well, guess what? That person is going to be a lot further along. And here's, again, that sad truth that everyone knows. The longer you spend on a game project, the less chance you have of it succeeding, breaking even, and sometimes even being good. Because if it took you, let's say, 6 years to make Doom, not Doom 2, not Doom 2016, I'm talking the original Doom, and you need to sell this game, how is just Doom going to sell when we have people who use stuff like GZ Doom to make these completely total conversion mods or completely different games doing amazing things, simply because they're using these assets and this code that's already there? And then, like we said, they're taking it further. They're not just saying, here's my version of E1M1 in Doom.
Right.
Give me $29.95 for it. It is, here's my interpretation of Doom, and I'm doing all of this stuff differently. We played earlier this year, Hedon, which is kind of like Doom Metroidvania, and that Vomitorium. It was kind of like this post-apocalyptic, like body horror Doom Metroidvania game that is crazy to look at. And again, this was all built off of GZ Doom. The whole boomer shooter craze that we've seen, from Dusk to Ultra Kill, Coltic, what was it? Why do I always forget the name of it? The one that's like takes place in like Europe. Oh man, I always forget the name of that one. The one's like in.
Definitely not gonna remember it then.
But these are games that, again, they're using these basic building blocks, the stuff that we already know. We already know what a cover shooter is, or an arcade shooter, or a platformer. That stuff's been figured out. So now you have to do something new with it. And one other point, if I throw it back over to you, this is, I think, one of the reasons why stuff like Super Mario Maker, like the Mega Man Maker, say that 10 times fast, that they're so fantastic, because they do something that we never had as kids. They give you all the code, all the logic, all the assets, and then say, do something with them. Like, you don't need to worry about figuring out the platformer logic in Mario or the AI for a Goomba. We've done that all for you. Now do something with it.
That literally, like, that right there, what you said, Josh, literally, like, proves it all. What we're talking about is, like, by removing that barrier to entry, right? By how to move a character, how to play a sound, like, for a UI, for example. Oh my gosh, UI. We're going to come back to that in a second. And instead, you're left with this pure, unadulterated, creative, like, development system, right? That you can just, all you're doing is creative, right? Working on narrative, working on just all the other things that you can do in a game, right? Instead of working on the basics, like, and those things, like you were saying, and I've harped on this, and we've both harped on this millions of times, about the very basics being broken, cannot be broken anymore. And this is the reason why, is because, and I've said this every time, do your menu first and build your game after the menu, right? Get your UI working first. And this is just for me. This is like, I'm telling you this from like years and years of experience. My first game, I said, oh, I'll do the menu last. And I learned the hard way. And everybody that does that learns the hard way. And the thing is that's the first thing you see. And those things can't be broken, right? There's no excuse for a UI to be broken. There's no excuse for any of those things to not work. Yep. So why would you be spending 6 months trying to figure out how to? Now, if you're going to be going to AAA and be a UI expert, then sure, right? Study into it. But if you are an indie game developer, you have so many things. I don't know if I posted this meme in your Discord, and it has Keanu Reeves and right, and it's a solo dev thing, and it's like, indie marketing, this and that. There's like 20,000 bullets that this person that you have to dodge, and as an indie dev, or indie studio, or regardless. And so removing as many of those as you can, so you can focus on actually creating an amazing product, an amazing something that people will like. That's the pros there, right? So.
And to GM Douglas's point about, by the same logic, even Unity Game Engine is an asset. Yeah. There are people out there who I think get stuck in that mentality that I must do everything by hand. I am the artist. It's not enough for me to just create this game. I must create every line of code and every asset, and I will compose all the music myself. And again, this stuff, if you're trying to be that, God's gift to game designer, that one person who can literally do everything, more power to you. But for the most of us out there, we're just trying to get a successful game out there.
Right.
And that in of itself, again, we've been spending the last like 20 minutes or so talking about assets. We haven't talked about game design. We haven't talked
Right.
about actually like building something using this, and that's that challenge. I go back to something that a developer told me a few years ago, and he said that game design is the combination of entertainment and programming. The programming, like Josh said, that stuff's been figured out. We know how to use Unity. We know how to use game engines. We know how to code. But you can't code enjoyment. You can't, there's not a button on Unity that says
Well
make
said.
game fun.
Oh my gosh, where is that enjoyment plus button? That just
Yes.
gonna crank it up to 11.
You have to pay extra for that on
That's
Unity.
right. That's a premium subscription.
Yeah.
And then there's gotcha boxes too, I think.
Oh, yeah. And fishing mini games as well. And again, this is what makes game design very tricky, is that for a lot of people, and going back to what I said about Mario Maker and Mega Man Maker, those they remove essentially half the hurdles that are standing in your way. The asset side. You can, again, making a good, a bad, or a masterclass Mario Maker level or Mega Man level is very different. But by at least removing that barrier, it gives a lot more people the opportunity to make it. And again, speaking about Mario, there is of course Lunar Magic, which is the, I guess, free Mario editor out there for people who make Kaizo games and have done many of the Kaizo hacks for Mario. And that is basically like what we said. Like that is the game engine equivalent of Mario, because they may give you some of the pre-made assets, but you still need to figure out all the logic. And people have done some fantastic stuff with that software. But again, it's all about providing people with the means to get started. And it's why a lot of people like myself have really harped on this idea of having more editor-based games, having more SDKs released. I said, just as Mel Winnies was saying, that modding for Warcraft, they're like games like StarCraft and Warcraft that released with an SDK. That opened up the door to a lot of people to start, again, at the most basic level, creating a game app. At the most advanced level, possibly making either a total or a full conversion mod for these games. Look at Half-Life. Look at stuff like They Hunger. And again, I played a few of the Half-Life 2 conversion mods, but they were still very impressive. And these are ways to get people into game design who may not have done it otherwise. And again, they could take what they learn and then maybe do some coding on their own for their next project.
Exactly. Literally did the same thing. I mean, I was programming when I was 6 and 7. I mean, I was already trying to like on an Apple IIe, if I'm gonna disclose my age here. On an Apple IIe, I was programming at 7. But when Quake and all those mods came out, I was making levels and I started editing, and it opened up a whole new world for me. And those skills that I learned, literally still use them to this day. That I learned from those SDKs exposed in Quake, exposed in Doom, all of the map editors, and like you learn so much, and it exposes people because like one of the coolest things like a studio would like to get is like get a really cool IP, and it's like here's your asset pack, right? Here's all your characters, here's all your lore, and it's like now mix it up and make now make it work, make the gameplay, make the narrative, and that's the best part. That's what we're trying to do. We're not trying to prove, look at what an amazing like hardcore programmer I am, or look at how hard we worked at rigging this character, or like we had the sound Foley guy hung off the side of the mountains to record the rocks falling. You know what I mean? Like that is not what we're trying to achieve. We're trying to achieve we're trying to achieve really great experiences for the consumer, and that's it. We're just trying to get a product out for people to enjoy and brighten up people's lives.
Yeah. And I want to stave off this comment because I feel someone's going to bring up about doing things from scratch. And that building something from scratch can lead to, very out there and very unique and original products. The Long War mod by Pavonis Interactive now, who's, again, as a very funny point, they're doing Terra Invicta. That when I interviewed the designer for it, he said that Firaxis did not have an SDK for XCOM and The Unknown. So they had to literally build all the software to edit the assets and edit everything for XCOM. And Josh is having an out-of-body experience right now as I'm saying this.
Oh my god.
And it took them several years to build that before they could even touch that to make the updated designs and the other things they want to do.
I bet they lived in the office. Oh my gosh.
And again, like, here's, I think, the point that people bring up. Well, it worked. They had a happy ending from that. But again, it could have been so much simpler. And and again, in the span of time that it took them to make the Long War mod, from scratch, someone else with an SDK could have made who knows how many different conversion mods. And the proof of that is XCOM 2. Because with XCOM 2, Firaxis gave out the SDK. They let people make all kinds of mods for it. And to Josh's point about, like, kind of giving people, like, the keys of the kingdom and letting them go nuts, it's this kind of user-generated content that can really prolong a game's lifespan and prolong its interests. Look literally at, again...
forever. Literally, like, forever. Like, I mean, there's people still modding, like we said, GDZ Zoom. Like, I mean, like, that's so old. And you would think, like, people would be moving to newer, using Call of Duty. No, they're still using these old school source engines to mod, like... You know what I mean? So it is extendedly that long.
Look at the Elder Scrolls. Look at Skyrim. Elder Scrolls. Skyrim only had like one mod release for it, right?
Is it like the #1 ranked still playing game of all time? Like, I mean...
it's on like every platform, like 7 different versions. They have, again, partial mods, full mods, asset mods. You can put, again, Macho Man Randy Savage into Skyrim. And again, like, as to what Josh was saying earlier, like, not every pre-made asset is going to be this, Game of the Year winning beautiful thing. But it's a start. It is, again, like, the difference between saying, I want to build a car from scratch. I will, smelt the metal and bend everything together, versus saying, I want to build, like, a rat rod. I want to take, this chassis, and I want to take this engine. And, this stuff's been done for me, and let me create something original from it.
Like that you mentioned Rat Rod there. Definitely. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, just taking it and putting your flair, your personality, your juice on it, and letting your creativity run wild instead of being encumbered and burdened by this, because I have experienced it still to this day. I mean, earlier today I was banging my head against the wall, and it's a very, like, simple problem. Like, you look at the problem and you say, oh, that seems so simple, why isn't that? And again, it's hard to quantify, like, game development issues that pop up. And again, if there's anything that can be solved for you and it's already been solved, you take the avenue, and all you need to do is personalize, change it up, and that way you can spend time on the important stuff that matters.
Yeah. And to that point, I think the biggest money maker someone could develop is a pre-made asset for interacting with doors. I think that's the thing that every indie developer will, like, say, like, you could create a prefab asset that solves all the logic for entering and opening and closing doors. You can make a gold mine right there, I think.
I think I have a few devs I can contact, ask them about them. Let's get the door thing solved. Yeah, that'd be amazing, because I need it solved in my game still too. So.
And again, like, the beauty about these kinds of pre-made assets, as to what Josh was saying, is that they solve problems that have already been figured out. Again, no one is approaching game design anymore in a vacuum. No one is literally saying, I will be the first person ever to build a platformer. Or, this is the only game that will ever be made that lets you shoot or reload a gun. These are things that have been refined. These are things that have been processed to the point that, again, it's like arguing about let's remake the wheel for the 800th time. And there are developers out there, and this is something that we've said on previous casts, that they view any kind of, standard or foundational thing as a challenge. I want to make a platformer where, the character jumps, like, all around, or the jumping logic is just, every jump feels like I'm on ice skates, on oil. And, again, people will argue that, uniqueness can sell a game. But if you make it so unique that there is no market for it, then that's a problem. And again, if you can, like we said, if you want to spend a year, 2 years trying to figure out how to make your perfect jump from scratch, that's a great challenge. But if you're trying to run a game company, if you have people on your budget, if you have bills to pay, the quicker you can get these issues solved, that's more money, or that's less money you need to spend.
Literally, we're literally diving into like ROI, like return on investment. We're talking about time is money, and that's like one of the most important things. If every time I talk to my game dev homies in the morning, it's like, what's going on? I don't have enough time. It's like that is the main thing. No time. And so like the more of that you can save, the more time you have for the things that really matter. And I promise you, learning how to make a character controller or learning how to make a character climb up and down the ladder or animate, like very basic rudimentary things that no one cares about, but they expect to work because it literally has to be there working. And it's not like something new. It is expected. These things are baseline expectations of video games. And so why are you there figuring out the how many bolts do we put on the wheel when this is already known, right?
Yep.
This is literally already known and tested by massive, huge games. Fortnite testing out massive technologies, Genshin Impact testing out massive APIs that are tested, and you can utilize those things. That you could like all of the Fortnite technology is there for you to utilize, right? This amazing cross-platform, play it on the you could develop a game, cross-platform, from the mobile that'll work on the mobile, the PC. That's cross-platform. Anyway, regardless, and you could do the same thing on Unity, right? And that is already there and it exists. Except I do personally know devs who are working on their own version for some reason themselves, when they could be working on, I don't know, level design or story or dialogue or character or lore, or feel or juice. I could continue on, Josh. I'm sure you could come up with so many other things that are missing in games that you see, and they're usually encumbered and struck down by the first basic point, which is opening it up and then like, how do I make the character move? How do I make the player press start? And when you press start, it goes to the level. Oh no, this took me 3 months to figure out. Now my level opens, tweet that. No one cares, right? Sadly, that's the thing, is because that stuff's already figured out. And so when higher level devs see you tweeting that, they know, okay, where you're at too, right? Or where you're standing. And so even the higher level devs will be aware, okay, this guy took like 9 months to figure out how to do this on a level.
Yeah, and there is no, game developers like license that, you have to be, that if you make your game from scratch, you get, the gold license, or your menu, if you build your entire menu from just raw code, that we give you a bonus star for that. And again, here's the very sad but still very poignant truth. The consumer doesn't care.
Does it care? Josh, have you ever mentioned in one of your reviews, oh, I know they built this code menu from
No.
scratch? Literally never. So it does not matter. It does not matter. The thing is that it needs to work and the product needs to work and the game needs to be good. And that's just the start.
Yep. And the thing is, like, when people argue that a game looks like an asset flip, or it looks, low budget or bad, oftentimes that's because the developer did not spend enough time putting their own unique stamp on a
Right.
game. Again,
Right.
if you go on game dev Twitter or any kind of a community of game devs, they will talk about all the little tricks and shortcuts and pre-made stuff they used as a foundation for their game. And I think this again goes back to that myth of kind of what we saw from retro games, that every retro game was perfectly done day one and they didn't need patches. And game developers these days are lazy and they have to rely on post-release patches and day one patches. No, those games were probably more so broken. It's just that we didn't have the tools or the ways to really see that. And again, for today, the consumer wants a quality experience. They don't want to load up a game, and again, all they see are, the stock Unity menu text boxes, and the option menu that is just, like the dev kit, or, like the developer console. That kind of stuff, it looks poorly on the designer. And like we've said, there's more than enough stuff out there that the most basic foundational nuts and bolts of game design, or game development I should say, that stuff has been solved. Now we want to see what you can do with it.
Exactly, and what you and the point you mentioned about older games, oh, they didn't have to update, they didn't have to patch. One thing that people are forgetting about the older games is that the actual play space and the actual like breadth and width of those games was extremely small compared to like the games that we currently have running. The magnitude and the scale of the games that we have now is nothing compared, like a Mario 1 compared to like a Grand Theft Auto 5. The amount of assets, the gap in assets and tech requirement is so massive, right? So the bugs are just magnitudely like going to, I mean, but of course they had tons of bugs back then too. They just, again, we didn't have the tools, and again the playground was much smaller, so they just couldn't be found the same way.
Mm-hmm. And for today, again, oh, what you can do today with Unity, with Game Maker, with even RPG Maker, is decades ahead of what was available 30 years ago, 40
Yes.
years ago. It's why we've seen that very huge jump in terms of game design and game philosophy over the past 20 years. Look at how much we've come in 20 years compared to going from 1980 to 1990.
Big, huge.
Look at 2010 to 2020. Look at how much that has evolved in terms of indie games. We've gone from indie games being that redhead stepchild, that, the shovelware of the industry,
Yep.
to now you have indie games like Celeste, Disco Elysium, Hades, and so on, being like able to compete and
Being the
beat.
juggernauts.
Yeah.
Yep. Complete juggernauts. So we got a few questions here.
And let me see. And I won't go back to what was it?
I don't want to let the questions go by too much here.
To Alexander's point about how much time you should spend designing something unique, as well as their point about you should have at least one unique mechanic. Like, again, like, this is what we talk about, that the days in which you can just sell a basic example of a game are kind of gone. We've all played Tetris, Doom, Call of Duty, Mario, Sonic, whatever. We want to see that unique selling point. Why is your game different from this game? This is why we say that a lot of video games are not directly competing with each other. Because one platformer is very different from another platformer, and an RPG to another one. But if all you're saying is after 10 years you have designed and created Final Fantasy 1, where is the interest in that?
Exactly. And to let me answer the other point of Alexandre Becker's point of how, or a question: how much time to spend designing something unique? Okay, so if I wanted to quantify this for you, it's depending on the asset, whether it be sound, character, or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. I want you to go ahead to look at the marketplace and look at something comparable to what you are trying to design. Say you want to make a character. Now I want you to then price the character, and then I want you to price it how long you think it would take you yourself to do, right? So
Mm-hmm.
for example, let's just say this character is, we're going to talk quality character. Let's say this character is $200, okay? Or like we'll say a double A character, so $200. And how long would it take you to create that same type of character with the same type of fidelity and that actually worked and was performant? And can you do it? And that's when you have to be real with yourself about that. Can you achieve that type of quality? And B, do you want to head down that road? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Because each one, there are millions and millions and millions of rabbit holes in game design, game development. In each one, you can just do nothing but that niche, and that's it. Like there's studios full of, I don't know, 500 to thousands of people, and their one job is just very, very, very niche, right? It's literally like texture compression, verifying the texture compression on the entire game, and there's a team of 12 of them doing it.
Yep.
Um, so that's what I recommend. So when you're asking yourself, how long do I spend time designing something unique versus going to the marketplace? That's the question you should ask yourself. How much would I pay myself? How much am I willing to pay? How much time do I have? And also consider everything else that you have to do in your game to create. I mean, that there's so like the list that you have. If you have a list, and if you have something itemized, you're gonna probably have to quadruple that time, squared, because everything you introduce to the game has the ability to break something else or add new bugs or just break everything in general. So yeah. So basically, long story short, how much is your time worth?
Mm-hmm. Once I'm just going to close my door. 1 second.
Okay. And then, so while Josh is closing his door, I'm going to go to Malwinius about good engines are tough to create from scratch. I would say that probably, yeah, creating an engine from scratch is a massive endeavor. And I think that people who are working on engines, I much respect to you if you have worked on developing your own engine. But really, it is a practice in mathematics and science, in really just making something function. And
Mm-hmm.
again, you're creating a game engine, not a game, right? So even after you made the game engine, you'd still have to make a game.
Mm-hmm. And to return to something like RPG Maker for a second, because a lot of people look down on RPG Maker games. Because it is one of those things that, because of the kind of limitations of that engine, it's
Right,
very easy for 10 different games to look and feel all like each other.
right,
But
definitely.
again, just like with anything that we've said, what you put into that is unique can go a long way. I played a Fear and Hunger 2 last night at the time of us recording this. And Fear and Hunger is a disturbingly difficult RPG. There really isn't anything else quite like it out there. And it is, again, built off of the backbone of RPG Maker. Does that mean, it could be better built on another engine? Of course. But could this game have been built, even in the first place, if the designer didn't have access to RPG Maker? Just like we've seen with a lot of people who've made mods and start, again, with SDKs. Could they have made something 1,000 times better in a Unity or Unreal? Quite
Yeah,
possible.
yeah,
But
yeah.
could they have even gotten off, step one, go on these other engines when you do have access to all this stuff that's already there? And then, as Josh said, it's about then applying your own unique spin on it.
Yeah, definitely. And we've talked about this before. Constraints makes games, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the constraints of making games is literally not designing the game, not the narrative, not the lore, but like we said, a massive constraint is these code blocks, the platforming, making the character work correctly, things like that. And so if we remove that constraint, then instead, we are allowed to only create instead. And I think that is just good. I think eventually we're going to get into the dark side soon. We're really amping up the positive of this. But again,
Mm-hmm.
that's the thing, you know, and like, a side note, you mentioned something about seeing the same characters. I've even heard some people referring to characters as in a play. So if they happen
Mm-hmm.
to see the same character in a game, they've even just like how the same actor can play in a different movie. Well, the
Mm-hmm.
same actor, maybe the same character can play in different games, but the same actor doesn't dress the same or talk the same or whatever. There's a spin on it, and it's a different person, but it's the same actor, right? So you
Mm-hmm.
can even consider it that way. That's a way to think of it also. Remember, it's just about putting your personality, your stamp, your brand, your flair, the juice, all that on the game yourself. And that's what's going to make it in itself. I guarantee you can make an amazing game maker game with really good lore, really good. Like you can make something stand
Mm-hmm.
out. If you put your stamp on it, you can make it stand out and it would be amazing. And it's totally possible. And I know that people really do hate on game maker games. I used to, I don't anymore. Now I hate on literally no game engines. I believe that if you're using any engine, you know,
Mm-hmm.
I'm happy for you, and I'm proud that you're in the space. So, I every engine, all engines matter.
Yep. And like we've said, that there is enough out there to give you that ground level start. And I think like even like taking this even further like higher up, there's even just the idea again of starting using these
Yeah.
engines. You know, having pre-made tutorials and
Yes.
lessons and books and
Yes.
videos. That there are people out there, and I've heard this from one of the developers I used to talk to a long time ago, that they were just like completely like opposed to using anything that was pre-made. Like they wanted to figure it all out themselves. They wanted to build the code and do all the art. And again, it's that question of maybe you do have the skill to do that, but the amount of time that it takes is going to end up hurting what you can do long term.
Yes.
If
Yes.
you
One hundred
only
percent.
if you let's say only have enough money for let's say 2 years that you can spend working on a game, and you spend a year and a half just trying to make the assets.
Yeah.
And I think to a point that you said earlier, and then we'll I think move on to talk about some of the dark side stuff about conceptualizing that using this kind of assets or using pre-mades and prefabs like this, it does allow you to get to the interesting stuff far quicker.
Yes.
And this again is why we've seen from the independent space so many unique and original
Yeah.
games. Yes, they could have spent, you know, and we've seen developers, and to this point, that there are a lot of developers who will try and release a small game, you know, 6 to 12 month dev cycle. They're not building all those assets from scratch in 6 to 12 months. They already know where they're going to get all those assets, or maybe they're just using the same assets from game to game, but they're trying something different. They are learning more and more. Okay, if I make my platform, and let's say I make a platformer about birds flying around. Okay, it was okay, doesn't work. Let's make another platformer. This time, let's make it about, I don't know, all wall jumping and teleport dashing. Hey, this is really good. There's some interest here. Maybe I can expand on this in another game. And then once you're confident in that design, then
Companions with the teleporting.
yeah. And then once you're confident in that design, then let's say, you know what? I think this could work. Let me hire a professional
That's
artist.
right.
Let me get a composer who's, you know, worked on all kinds of games. And that's how we iterate. Again, like something like Hollow Knight, any big name indie game or any big name success didn't just start as their first game, or this isn't the first time these people worked on these kinds of projects. They've built up experience, they've worked on prototypes and game jams, and possibly have entire folders of failed concepts that are just, could be circles jumping around fighting triangles. But you're never going to get to the point where you can now say, okay, I figured out the concept, let me, add the budget and the talent to it, if you're just stuck all the time, trying to code everything from scratch and build everything from scratch game to game.
Well put, Josh. I mean, like, assets allow, like you said, to your point, assets allow you to get to the fun and to prototype very quickly. So sure, I could buy some marketplace assets and I could get it together and I could get the design together, and then I could create a pitch deck and promote that demo and say, I just need the funding for this. And then you could get the funding, and then you have the concept and everything, and then you could present that to the character artist, you can present that to your audio guy, you can present that to your right, and it said, this is what we're looking for, here is our vision, this is what we need to do, and you have the funding, right? And that's that's like another valid point that you made, that it allows us to do, is like, regardless, even if those marketplace assets are what you start out with, it allows you to start, and B, it allows you to make a prototype that you could test out and you could feel. C, I also have at least like 5 to 15 hard drives full of circles and triangles fighting each other. And D, everyone should. And F, I mean, that's like the most important thing, is that it allows us to get to the fun as quick as possible, get a product out. I mean, that's what we're trying to do. We're literally not trying to itemize the triangle in the square circle fighting.
You're not trying to create a new triangle, basically.
Yes.
Create a new shape, everyone. From now on, you can't use squares, circles, and triangles. I want scryangles and trials. And
triangles.
I don't know, workles. Rhombuses meet circles. And that's how you must design a game from this point on.
I love it. I love it.
I have followed, I know there's several indie developers, or even on my Discord, who have been working on prototypes and concepts for several years. And they're at that point where they have, the basic game was using all, it may not even be 100% pre-made. It could just be, I'm not good with sound design. I'm just going to use, a stock pew, pew, or, a sword swing animation. But guess what? We're now at the point where this game, from a design standpoint, is fantastic. Let's start putting more investment in it. Let's start hiring people who know this stuff inside and out. My friend Ken, who designed my website and is working on several games, he's talked about this before, that, to him, something that he knows that he is good at, he could do that in 30 minutes to an hour. For someone who has... What was that?
And if you're bad at it?
It can take months. It can take years. It may never even get done. And this is that difference between someone who is a professional who knows whatever their specific craft is, inside and out, versus someone who's trying to chase everything. And again, how many designers are also master composers, who are also master social media solvents, who are also, fantastic 3D or 2D modelers, and who can put this all together. They can build an Unreal 5 game in 2 weeks. Those kinds of people.
Very few, 0.01%, Josh.
Yeah. And again, what you can do, and as you grow and you can keep refining and iterating, this is where we get these fantastic ideas. And again, there is no shame in saying that your game took 3 years, 7 years, 10 years to be made, if you're doing it part-time, if it takes you time to build this stuff out. And if you can release a game and it does well, and you manage, I think this is the other aspect of the positives of using assets, again, is, as we said, it saves money. It
Mhm.
gives you more return on investment. And my last positive example, again, is Ask Deliberate Revision. This is a game that took 15 years of development using, I think, almost 100%
That-
pre-made art assets. I know, like, the soundtrack is like 30 different free open source songs that they
Awesome.
used. And again, it doesn't look like an Unreal game. It doesn't look like a game from a professional AAA studio. But it doesn't have to. It sells it on the gameplay. And I guess my final point before I get to the dark side is that when you do it right, when everything is gelling with the mechanics, with the art, with the assets, even if it is pre-made, if your unique spin is strong enough, people are not going to care that you use generic bush asset 4 and this is stock, orc 7 in your game. They're just going to be enjoying what's there.
Exactly. Well put. I mean, I can't add anything to that, Josh. I think it's time to get to the dark side.
Mm-hmm. And that takes us back to that very popular term, the asset flip game. When it just looks like you've taken, you just went on Unity, you bought 7 different assets of, environments and characters, Control C, Control V them into your game, and you're now selling it for 19.95 on Steam. And like it was brought up earlier, that the really egregious asset flips. That kind of stuff has, I think, largely gone away on Steam. Like,
Yeah,
Valve finally
definitely.
got around to stamping that down.
I mean, also, like, you can't do it too often. And then, like, if we're still talking about return on investment, there's not going to be much return on your investment if you're going to try and do it again. So
Hmm.
that doesn't work. Go ahead, Josh.
I was just gonna say, and like to your point about having the options menu and making sure that that stuff is right. People, again, they're willing to put up with things not being, super high grade. You spend 30 years hand making the pixels and carving them
Yeah,
yourself, but they still want things to look unified. And this is, again, goes back to that stigma of programmer art. When it looks like all you did was just copy and paste everything. Okay, we're in a fantasy forest, and here's Boba Fett. And now here's Mario in the background. And look over there, there's Kirby, and there's a Naruto. And, this is my game. That's the kind of stuff that people will take one look at and go, nope, I'm
nope.
not even going to touch that. And
Yeah,
unfortunately, there is still a lot of low quality games on Steam. A lot of games that are very, let's say, not safe for work that we can't bring
so
up here. And again, there may be an audience for that, but it's not exactly where you want to kind of stake your business and your
yeah.
livelihood on.
Right, right. And like a side note here, like, okay, we want to talk about like best practices. So we're on the dark side now. So we're going
Mhm.
to talk about best practices um when you're
Mhm.
developing your game. Now, like I said before, again, a lot of these code bases, a lot of these characters, a lot of the audio, none of it is designed to be cohesive or designed to work together. None of A lot of code bases have no idea to communicate with another code base. So there's going to be a lot of work, regardless of what you. There's going to be mountains and mountains of work, regardless of what you do on your side. If you're using assets, if you're not using assets, there's a ton of work cut out for you. The thing is though, you can learn some very bad practices. You can believe that someone's coding practice that you see in a code block is the proper way to implement something. This is the proper way to do a save file. Okay, when actually that is the exact wrong way to do it. Or this is the proper way to implement a UI or a checkpoint or the health system. Or this is the way to do just any aspect of game development. And you might believe that is the way to do it. So that can lead to some very bad practices on how you develop forward. And right, and one of the things I'm sure we're going to have a cast on continuation of your studio, continuation of code
Mm-hmm.
bases, continuation of everything, and this is a part of it. Is that you always want to make sure. I lost my train of thought there, Josh, but
Mm-hmm.
go ahead, pick me up.
Well, I guess we could have been saying was you want to put your best foot forward. You want your game to be presentable. You want someone to look at your game and go, "This is something that I want to play." And if you're not taking the time to, improve and work on these assets, again, like we've said in the last part, the first challenge is, getting a chassis for a car, getting a steering wheel, getting an engine. Okay. How do you make all that work? How do you make this
Yes,
car different from this car?
that car.
And that's where the skill of the designer comes in. Because,
Right.
again, if you want to make a stock bare bones platform or a stock RPG or a Doom clone, there are thousands at this point, I'm sure, of tutorials and videos about,
Mm-hmm.
okay, this is how you make Mario walk from left to right. This is how you
Mm-hmm.
make him jump. If that's where you stop and you don't
Right.
start looking more into it,
Right. That's the start.
yep, that's step one. That is not,
Step
again,
one.
like we said earlier, your goal should not be to just say, I just want to spend 10 years to make Super Mario Bros. 1. Or I just want to make the first level of Doom or Quake. You want to be able to take that and then run in a direction with it. Because if you can't do that, the consumer is not going to care. They're not going to be interested in you spending 15 years to make Final Fantasy, or 2 years just to have your character, learn how to open up an inventory. Or, spend a year just to make sure that your option menu doesn't crash your game.
Right, right. Like, and we say this again and again, and it's the fact, and I think some people take it to heart.
Mm-hmm.
It's my grit. I did the code. I did it all.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact is that sadly the consumer is not going to care, and sadly I won't care either. And I might think a little poorly of you in your decision making.
Mm-hmm.
That you should have spent time on going from, like we said, step one is getting that basic sword swing
Mm-hmm.
animation, and then what are you going to do with that? How are you going to alter it? How are you going to add flair? What kind of animation, what kind of feel? Are you going to add a hit stop? Are you going to add a
Mm-hmm.
knockback? How's the combat going to feel? So we should be focusing on the bigger things, and so we should be getting better products, not baseline products that are just barely functioning. And hey, I did it, which again is fine, because remember, I not is fine. Let's clarify that. Not is
Mm-hmm.
fine if you're trying to be sustainable and that's your only goal.
Mm-hmm.
If you're trying to continue fast cycles and to keep going and to improve from there, then yes, that is good. If you're like, I just want to get a game out there and see what it's like, because I've done that. I've literally put
Mm-hmm.
my very first together game. I did it in a few months. I was like, I just want to get it published, see what it's like to get it published on the store, see what the reaction is, reviews, talking to people, and then I'll go into my next game. And I learned so much in each one. But the beginning goal was that my first thing was going to teach me, and everyone was going to move forward from there, and that there was a plan.
Yes. And this is, I think, one of the reasons, I think this is what kind of separates me from some other people who review or look at games, that I play a lot of student builds. I play games that are submitted by student teams. And again, a student team working on a project for college is not going to have the same polish as a 10-year AAA game with a $5 million plus budget.
It's like, oh, you didn't have the money. Ooh.
Yeah. Your game didn't feature ray tracing as a student team, F. But the point is, as you just said, that sometimes the goal, especially if you're brand new, is just to get it done. Yes, it's not going to feature super realistic graphics, or maybe the option menu doesn't work. But if this is literally your first project, literally the first game you have ever designed, that's alright. again, if you're as long as you come into it with the right expectations, that
Right.
this game is probably not going to set us up on easy street for the rest of our lives. But if we can use that as a foundation to understand how we work as a team and how we can start, refining our dev process going forward, maybe 2 games, 5 games, maybe who knows how many more games in the future, you have that Hollow Knight or you have that Hades. I literally just interviewed a college group of students last week, recorded, and they spent like a year or two on this like very simple mobile game, and now they're going to try and make a full 3D game as their second project. And again, they said that we know this game isn't going to be a mass seller. We know this isn't going to be this, whirlwind tour de force. But this is how we kind of start sharpening our teeth and getting our feet wet. And we can start learning from that. And again, and I said this to them, it's better to learn and fail while you're in high school or college than when you're trying to balance a mortgage and a second job. And you're trying to figure all this stuff out at the same time.
Yes, I have lots of devs on Twitter that are, they call themselves garage devs, or it's like where they're trying to figure out life itself also as the same time as game dev, and really like fail fast, fail quick, fail fast, something like that. You want to get it done and fail as quick as you can so you can move on to the next and eventually get to your success, right? By hopefully your 5th game, your 8th game. Then hopefully we're on easy street, right? But it's going to take some time from there, and you're not going to get there unless you release something. And then you're not going to get feedback unless you release something, unless you have people play it. You're not going to know. You're just going to be stuck in your room being like, it can move left and right, tweet. Like,
let's sell it. Let's put it on Steam.
Sell it, ship it. Right. You have to go way past that. Again, this is just the starting point. We're talking about there's an amazing starting point. This is one of the best times to make games ever. It's very hard and very noisy, and it's very difficult. But this is one of literally the best times in terms of availability, in terms of knowledge base. Shows like this exist where we're literally discussing this down to the bits and bytes.
And I also want to clarify, I think, another point here. Again, if you're watching this right now and you have no interest in selling a game professionally, if you have no interest in turning this into a living, you can ignore what we're talking about here.
Right.
This show, and again, the stuff that I talk about specifically, this is for people who are trying to turn game design or game dev into a livable business. If you are, 1000% into art, if you are trying to make games as, art pieces, you don't care about playtesting, you don't care about selling the game, you are trying to make a game as a statement, you can ignore this stuff. But again, if you are even, 1%, if you are trying to sell your game even for a penny, even for 50 cents, this is when you are dealing with your game as a product. And people have standards for products. They don't care, again, if you're using pre-made assets for walking and jumping. They do care if your game crashes and causes a blue screen of death, or that there's a memory leak and your 2D Mario game plays and handles worse than Doom Eternal. I wish I had one there, Chris. Besides taking that medicine that I told you about, I always found like cold compresses can sometimes help. Like close my eyes and put like a very cold washcloth on.
I had one yesterday and I didn't find an answer, so
there's no. If someone can come with a pre-made prefab asset for migraine solving, there you go.
Solver. Prefab migraine solver. You got a gold mine there.
We came with 2 brilliant ideas: the prefab for doors and prefab for migraines.
That's right.
Again, you watch the show. and you get $1 million ideas.
Migraine asset flip, Josh.
Migraine asset simulator. There we go. And like we've said, that people will notice if you're not doing the job. Again, you can use pre-made assets. You can copy paste entire codes and everything off the Unity store into your game. But it has to have cohesion to it. If you're again trying just to use every generic asset and not touching up anything, people are going to notice that. Again, this goes back to that term of programmer art. That even if, let's say you did hire, 2 or 3 different artists to work on your game, but they turn in 3 completely different art styles, and you say, you know what? Yes, this is a sci-fi game, but I'm going to use this, anime spaceship with this ultra-realistic orc, with this pixel gun, and sell my game.
I love it.
People are just going to be like, what the heck am I looking at? They're going to use stronger language than that.
Maybe like 20 years ago that might have worked for somebody that might have worked.
Yeah. And here's, I think, the other point. Like we go even darker. Ripping assets from a game to use for your own. Ooh. That is a huge no-no.
Oh, yeah.
Like we've said, you cannot directly copyright mechanics and game systems. Yeah. But you can copyright anything that is brandable, that is an IP. There's nothing stopping you from, again, using the red orb for health, blue orb for mana idea from Diablo, from any ARPG. But if you just literally, cut that out of Diablo 3 and put it on your screen, you are, inviting
Twitter real quick. The front page of Twitter fast.
You are inviting the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse into your house.
For sure. So that's where you have to be careful, and you have to have some kind. You have to make some decisions, and you have to be aware and be careful of what you put in the game and how you change it. Put the work in, like you were saying, Josh. It shows when you're not putting the work in, when it's just copy pasta. They can see it, and it shows, and we can literally from a mile away we can vibe it, we can feel it. And so it literally, and again, no one cares if you use bush number 4 and orc number 7, but if it's cohesive and it works, then it will be fun and people will love it, right? And no one, go ahead.
I would say, but they will care if you use the character from Hollow Knight, or if you rip one of the boss characters from Hades, or if you're just, again, if you're literally copying another game. Remember, we saw something like, there's VVVVVV, and then I saw an indie developer make VVVVVVV. Or BBBBBBBBB. Or, again, even if you, and I want to actually go one more step further. Even if you get permission from the developer, even if you reach out and say, you know what, can I use this asset in my game? Or can I name my game similar to yours? And they say, sure. Guess what? That still doesn't help the court of public opinion. If they see you just directly ripping off Hollow Knight or Team Cherry, even if you have, a signed, notarized letter from Team Cherry saying, yes, you can use every one of our assets for your game, people are going to see this as you essentially hurting another IP. And more importantly, you're hurting a beloved IP. And guess what? Consumers will defend their favorite IPs to the death, as we have seen many, many, many times.
Indeed, Josh. Indeed. I mean, like I said, if you want to end up at the front page, put a Giddy image watermark in your game, and you will instantly be found. If you were lost, you will be found.
What's that saying? You do not want to be the main character on Twitter.
That's right. You do not want to be the main character on Twitter, so don't be that person.
And like we've said, it, in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't take a lot to put your own spin on something that's already been established and is already foundational. But it means having that spark. It means having that idea. Because if you don't have that, again, no amount of assets that you buy off of Unity or Unreal is going to, I guess, build the game for you. Again, there is, like we've said, Unreal doesn't have that make game idea button, the make game compiler. You just put 27 assets in, you hit the button, it all shovels it around, and in like 10 minutes or less, you have a completely original game.
No, I'm sure Vince that just hopped in the chat can attribute to that. We haven't found that checkbox yet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I mean copying or directly soon AI will have that. Yeah, we could probably get into that in a second. But copying or directly referencing someone else's ripping work, like that is just ripping assets out of someone else. That is completely the worst. I'm sorry. Like we said, there's orc number 7, there's bush number 4, bush number 2. Like they're there. They're on the marketplace. They're free. You can use them. So don't steal from someone else. That is like the worst thing, and then you will be the main character on Twitter. And then like referring to AI, I'm not gonna really like go on a rant like I went on earlier, but I'll make a short thing that one of the things that AI will allow, like especially solo devs and indie games to do is really to conceptualize, right? So I could be like how you were saying how I can go to Fiverr and I would come back with 3 different spaceship ideas and they all look different and none of them are coherent. Well, I could go to, for example, Stable Diffusion. I could say rusty Apex Legends type ship that's kind of like it, or I don't know, made in Blender. And then I spit it out and I find one that I like and I can give it to my concept artist and I can say something like this. And then the concept artists can all take it and they have something to go from. You can do the same thing with audio, same thing with character. And so that's like one of the great things that AI can be able to do. But as far as like getting it across the goalpost, AI is far from it, and we're not going to be there yet. I'm sure within like maybe like 3 years or so, there'll be some stuff that will be able to be generated through Unreal and Unity, but it's still going to be eons before we reach like the apex of pure creative game design, where we're literally not talking about game development at all, and it's only game design. Josh, it'll be the best time for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, yeah, we do need to have a discussion about what AI art means, and we're still trying to get Tomo on for that one. And again,
well, hopefully next week we'll be on a roll if we do it. We'll be on a roll.
Yeah, let's see. Next week is the 24th. Yeah, we could, if we can get him, we can fit that in. The 31st will be Game of the Year topic for.
That's right. That's right.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and again, it's that challenge of what is this asset actually bringing to the game? What is this piece of code bringing to it? And again, people can become very perceptive when it comes to something not meshing with everything else. And like we've said, the bar of quality has grown exponentially over the past 10 years. The days in which you can just say, again, I'm going to spend 5 years and recreate Tetris, that's not going to sell.
That would be some like personal holy gold thing, right? It's not going to sell. And again, this podcast is not directed to those type of people, right? Like we're not speaking to someone who's just merely I want to make a game engine and just to be able to say I made one, you know what I mean? And I know people like that who just the joy is actually building.
They want that challenge. They want to be able to say they can do that. And again, to this point about this show and to this channel, if you are approaching things purely from an artistic standpoint or a challenge standpoint, you have no interest in making a commercial viable product in the game industry, you can ignore what we're talking about. This is not the show for you. That one game that ripped off Stardew. think there's been several games. Don't forget the Flappy Bird clones.
Happy Bird. There was someone who stole a tree. I think Vince can say it in there. Midgard. Yeah, they stole a tree from. But what game though? It was a big game. I don't know why they would steal a tree from that game, and it was just a tree asset. You could buy tree number 2 for like 99 cents or free on the Unity store, and they decided to rip it out of a very popular game. I can't remember which game it was.
Mm-hmm. And again, you do not want to be taking things from another game in terms of assets, even if you do get permission for it.
Yeah,
because
even
the
if you do.
consumer is not going to care that you got a notarized letter or you got.
No,
they're going to.
Even if you literally put it on the box, oh, we have authorization to use the tree. The person's just going to see the tree and be like, "Did they steal that tree from Stardew Valley?" Right? They're not going to care that you got permission. So definitely don't do that for sure. 100%, Josh. Like on point on that.
Mm-hmm. And like we've said, if this is a student project, if this is a free project that you don't care about, and hopefully it does not get back to the parent company of these assets, okay, maybe you can wiggle room it just a little bit. But again, the second you put that on the internet, you're kind of starting that clock.
Yeah.
And some people may just, send you a warning saying, we don't want you to use these assets. Other people may just go, you know what? Here's our lawyer issuing a lawsuit at you for using this. Enjoy.
Yeah, Chris. I mean, they picked it up, and I don't know. Maybe Vince or Chris or might know, but like I said, there was a Getty image in one of the Final Fantasy, the one that was on a Crisis Core one. So there's like Getty image pictures in there, and it's like we're talking about massive studios. Don't do that if you're an indie. There's a game called War Died. Good to. Good.
Yep, and like we've said, if you're trying to get these games, onto a store page, again, if you have the remotest thought of selling a game, using stolen assets is kind of how you can kill a studio.
Yeah, kind of how you just kind of get blacklisted from the industry. We've mentioned this before, and the industry, again, the industry is 30 years old, but it is still very small. The world itself it's a small world. It's a saying. We say the game dev industry is, we know everyone is pretty much known. And if you do something bad, such as stealing from another game dev, you will be known, and you will be the main character on Twitter, and it will be very hard to get your career back. It is not worth the return on investment to be a thief. Let's just say that.
Yep.
Rhyme. That was the name of the game that stole the tree. If you should look into that, Josh, it is a fiasco. It was a big fiasco.
Does that sound familiar?
Because of that fiasco.
I own a game called Rhyme. Is that it? Like, it looks like an open world style game.
Yeah. Does it have green trees in it? Look kind of stylized.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. That's the one.
Yep. And again, this can lead, to what Josh said. It can lead to blacklisting. And the industry, and especially the people in the industry, they have very long memories when it comes to people who steal assets, who plagiarize other games, and it can sink a career before it gets started.
Yeah,
and go ahead.
As this is a creative industry of passion, and so like you said, people have very long memories because we are so passionate about it, right? So when you are going after someone's, this is what we've all wanted to do since we were children, right? Every single one of us who are making games or whenever it hit us, it's something we wanted to do. And when you attack that and when you go after that, we do take that very personally, and we will remember. So as in The Walking Dead, what did it say? This will be remembered.
You will remember this.
You will remember. Yes, you will remember this. Character will remember this. Thoughts about High on Life.
Josh? I think when they stop talking, the gameplay is all right, but there is just so much time spent listening to them rattle on about things. Yeah. Oh, hi, Leona. What are you talking about?
Roblox.
Yeah, good old Roblox. And again, like there are people who've been using like stolen assets in Roblox and
That's
building
right.
copycat games and stuff like that. And it is something you need to be very careful about when you're taking that next step. Again, if you want to rip assets and do it for a student project or for something that has you will never show to the outside world, okay, we'll give you that one. But again, this is not how you start building a professional studio. And if you do these, like we've said, when it comes to the foundational stuff, that if you don't get the foundational stuff right, your chance of making something of high quality it greatly diminishes. And
Right.
again, people don't care about a handmade game. They don't care that you spent 8 years doing this
Bro,
all from scratch.
I have seen so many. How many have you seen those hand drawn games that were all hand drawn and they were like, I spent so many years hand drawing and it's like it looks nice and it looks good, but like the
It
execution of
plays badly.
yeah, and you feel so bad for those devs. Like
Mm-hmm.
there was a I don't know a hand drawn platformer recently, and I was like, I
Mm-hmm.
cannot imagine how much work that took when he could have when so much other time could have him or her could spend so much time on I don't know making it platform well instead of drawing out every single platform, for example, right?
Mm-hmm. And like we said, there are things that you can kind of shortcut. The code for how to do platforming, getting an asset for a sword swing or a gun reload.
Yep,
Okay, but you have to go somewhere with it.
with it. Only the start. It's only the start. Don't just stop there. Do not. So the main thing would be just to buy an asset and leave it as is. If you were going to buy something, you need to put your own personal stamp and brand on it. Your studio, you yourself,
Mm-hmm.
who you are. Your.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
and again, make it fit the game. If you're building
Cohesiveness.
a fantasy game and you're surrounded by, wizards and orcs and castles, having, assets from Call of Duty or military grade tanks in the background is not going to work. And someone will argue, I think, about, the games that are meant to look intentionally janky. Stuff
Yeah.
like Cruelty Squad, I think would be a good
Mm,
example of this.
yeah.
And again, like it's that case of
Well, how many cruelty squads can you have though? Right? I
yeah.
mean, you
And I just want to see what Cruelty Squad has gotten. Okay, they're up to almost 10,000 reviews, so it did succeed with that aesthetic and look.
okay. Okay. Surprising.
Yeah, but again, it's that case of did it succeed because it was a great game and it pushed things with its unique assets, or did it kind of succeed on the quirky word of mouth? Hey, you gotta see this game. It looks all weird and it's very janky to play, and that's part of the charm. And again, some games can get away with that. It's kind of like, hitting a pinball or a pachinko and,
Just
somehow
in that
after bouncing
one.
all over, it lands in the jackpot spot.
How come there's no pachinko video games, Josh?
Oh yeah,
None
or gotcha games or slot machines. There's none of that in the game
of
industry.
that.
But again, it's that case of okay, it worked, but can you build a studio, a franchise off of
Right.
games that do that? And for a lot of these games, they may have that kind of first title, hey, it's all weird and nothing works right. Like it's a goat simulator. But does that work for game number 2 and game
Right.
number 3?
Did you
Because
try Goat Simulator 3, by the way?
no, I did not. I did try the first one.
Yeah, I played the first one. I missed 2, and I was like, you know what? I can't believe they made a 3. I might actually see how much they've like improve the goat
Hmm.
simulation.
Because here's this will be my final point then. That there are some developers who get stuck in this trap of every game must be 100% original, or every game must be the same game. Like, I'm just using what I did, like, it's again that idea of the handcraftedness that, this is my very first handmade, I don't know, hammer. It's all
Right.
lopsided, it doesn't work right, but
I
it's the
love it.
first one I made, and I'm going to use it on every single project, no matter what. That kind of mentality, unfortunately, doesn't lead to a successful studio.
Right.
If,
Iteration, iteration.
as we said, if you make a mistake in game number one, people are like, okay, it's the first game, I'm willing to put up with it. If that mistake is in game number 7, if it's the same exact issues, if you have the same bugs and crashes to desktop in each one of your games, people are going to start to feel like, what is this person doing? They're just making the same game and asking me to spend 5, 10, $15 on it. And people are going to get tired of that. And I can guarantee you are not going to bring in new people at that point.
Indeed. Well put, Josh. Well put.
And I'm going to look this up really fast. I want to see what Goat Simulator 1. Let's see. They have almost 47,000 reviews on Steam. Is Goat Simulator 3 on Steam, or is that an Epic exclusive?
Let me see. I think it might be an Epic exclusive. That would be a
There's
plot twist.
let's see.
That is a plot twist.
Goat Simulator 3. No, it
Yeah,
is an
it's
Epic Game Store exclusive.
exclusive. Wow. Okay.
Well, they don't have a forum over there, so we can't know
We
how they.
can't even tell. That's why they did it there.
But like I've said, I've seen games where, the first game gets 10,000 reviews, the second game gets 4,000 reviews, the third game gets 1,000 reviews.
Yeah.
And you don't want to either be going backwards or being stuck in one spot.
Right.
And to kind of like tie all this back together when it comes to assets, the assets and the prefabs, they are there to provide you with a ground level, step one. They're not there to solve your entire game. And you need to go beyond that. And like we've said, we've all know what makes a good platformer. We know what makes good shooting, what makes a good shmup or a good RPG. That's the kind of stuff that assets can kind of solve and get you past. But you need to go further than that. You need to prove to people that your game isn't just ripping off Final Fantasy, or it's not going to be the umpteenth Mario game. And if you can do that, even if you use, again, already made assets, if you're using stuff that's already been built, but you put your own spin on it, there will always be people who will complain. There will be people who say, oh, this looks like a clip art game, or this looks like a ripoff on
Right.
so-and-so. But if your game works and people love it, they will be shouted down by your fans saying, who the hell cares that they took this tree off of Unity? Look at this amazing procedurally generated game they have.
Has anyone ever broken down like Vampire Survivors art? I've always wondered about that.
Yeah,
Like
I'm not sure.
where it was sourced. I'd always kind of wondered. I guess if I'm gonna go into my final point, I'm just gonna end with like some pros on it.
Mhm.
Like for one, like we'll say like placeholder art and prototyping. Like what marketplace assets are, code blocks, audio, things that are out there. They're there to get you started and to get you going, to help conceptualize your creativity, right? And to get you going. And where you go from there is up to you. You cannot stop there. You cannot
Mhm.
simply purchase the asset and leave it as is and just put them all together. That's a big no-no. The customers will see that. Everybody knows that. And I mean, you will be called out on Twitter instantly. All you have to do is just put your own spin on it, your own flair on it. As I always mention, juice.
Mhm.
Always add something to it. And then again, back to the baselines. Like when we're talking about, a lot of these things, for like from menus to characters, none of those things, should be
Mm-hmm.
broken, right? So like if you're going to use assets for anything, use it for a menu, use it for a character controller, and then go from there. So that way,
Mm-hmm.
instead, you're working on the fun. You can get a prototype out there. You can get that. You can get a pitch deck. You can get feedback. You can release a game, and you can move on and get to the next one, and just keep working on games. And that's it. That's what we want to
Mm-hmm.
do, and that's what assets allow you to do. Falling into the dark side, which would be stealing assets, and not using your creativity with what your base is starting
Mm-hmm.
with, right? Those would be the things that you should avoid. But
Yeah.
that pretty much sums it up, Josh.
And I want to know what you just said about having like the pre-made or using that as a foundation. That already create assets and stuff like that, especially when it comes to like code, it works at the basic level, but again, it doesn't quite work when you're getting to your unique selling point. Again,
That's
if
right.
you want to use, already established code or pre-made assets for a 2D platformer, that's going to get you, again, walk left to right, jump up and down. But if you want to try and make a Super Meat Boy game, or an N++, or a Metroidvania, that's going to require the handmade touch. Because when we get to unique stuff, there really isn't, a prefab. I'm sure there's no art asset or Unity asset for how to do wave dashing, or
No.
how to do like a crazy double jump into a floater jump into a teleport jump, because
Nope.
this is where you really have to start, putting your own spin. And
Yeah.
like we've said, the foundational stuff that's been figured out, that work has been done for you. Where can you take that?
Yeah. The Lego blocks have been forged. How are you going to put them together, make them look nice, make it work well, and be enjoyable?
Yeah. And to Chris's comment, yes, like if you have some placeholder art and you say, okay, this is kind of what I want,
Yeah.
can you go further? And again, for a lot of artists, for people who do art, music, that kind of generation for a living, they can do a lot for you. Provided, of course, you have the money, you have the
Right.
resources for it. And again, for your first project, you probably don't want to commission a full orchestra to do your
No.
music
No.
for a student
No.
game.
No. And I mean, and like you just said, I mean, you mentioned something about time earlier, and I was like, I was recently doing something. I think it was some character rigging,
Mm-hmm.
and I contracted out. They did it literally in 20 minutes. I wasted 2 days trying to do it on my own.
Yeah.
So just if you want to like think about that, and I just was like, you know what? I can't do this. I don't have the skill level. Let me contact 20 minutes, boom, done. And
Yeah.
so, like, when there's someone and you have the resources to do it, you can always reach it and do that, right? So, I
Yeah.
mean,
And again, when you're starting out, you can use prefab assets. You can use, again, when it comes to game dev, there are a lot of developers who they will use code and logic that they did from one game to another game.
yes,
Again,
yes,
we
I
talk
highly
about
recommend that.
hardcore game dev when you throw out your computer after each project and then you go and build a
Yes,
new computer and you
yes.
start the process all over again. You set a fire to your desktop as soon as the
That's
game
right.
is done.
I've actually had that happen. I was almost about to publish a game, and the computer caught on fire, and I
Oh,
had to recode it in like a month. Luckily, everything was still fresh in my head, but yeah, that did happen to me once.
there you go. There's your hardcore game dev badge right there. Computer gets set on fire, build a game.
Failed the game.
You've earned 10 achievement points for that.
There you
Game
go.
dev
Got
achievement
my
points.
ding. That's
All right, but I think that is pretty
about it.
much
Yeah.
it. Anything else from you?
Man, I think we pretty much summed it up perfectly. That's pretty much it, Josh.
All right. So I think with that, we will wrap things up for this week. So for our next show, if we can get Tomo, we will probably do AI art. If we can't, we'll see what's on our list. But for the following Saturday, that will be, well, December 31st, we will be talking Game of the Year. So be
Year.
sure to
That's
tune in
right.
for
Game
that.
of the year. Join us so we can do game of the year correctly,
Hmm.
and you can watch it done right. Oh, well, you mentioned game of the year. I have the dress from
There
game of
you
the
go.
year, so we'll have that for the show.
Is that going to be a costume for a samurai pig? Is that going to be one of the
Yes,
unlockable?
it will be unlockable gotcha boxes in there. Very, very low drop rate though.
All right. So, with that said, everyone, be sure to do all the liking, subscribing, and commenting. Check out my Discord and Patreon. There are links up there and down below.
And for me, my links are down below. Wishlist Samurai Pig, Rooster Rampage. Contact me on, follow me on Twitter. Contact me for consulting and game development and such. Join Josh's Discord. Buy
Mhm.
10 books. And as always, join us back next time.
Yep. We'll be back around 5:15 for next Saturday. So, everyone, have a great weekend. Thank you to everyone who's been tuning in live. And come back for daily discussions on game design here and on game wisdom, where examine the art and science of games, and try to solve migraine related issues as well.
Yes.
So, everyone, have a great night and a great holiday.